What is up, guys? Steven here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a kind of an educational slash opinion video, and what I mean by that is that the first half, or about half of this video, is going to be explaining the Smogon banning process, and in particular we're going to be talking about OU. I'm going to explain how Pokemon get banned and all of that, and then explain the Smogon banning process. And then after that, I'm going to go back through the process and kind of give my opinion on the process and how it could maybe be improved. So, as you know, we're talking about Smogon, and pretty much everything I'm going to be showing you is going to come from the forums, so you can look at this information yourself. So, some of you may not know the difference between a ban and a rise via usage. In this video that Richard put out, does a really good job of explaining the difference between a ban and a rise via usage. And if you don't understand that difference, then I would highly suggest going and watching this video, as it explains it very well. So I would pause this video and go watch this one, and then come back to this. And if you already know, then good on you, and we are going to continue. So I guess the first question that comes up is, how is a Pokemon banned? And there are two ways that this can happen. The first of which is a quick ban. And a quick ban is basically when something is so broken that it's really obvious that it needs to go, and it basically just gets ousted immediately by the people who are, quote-unquote important in OU. And the second way is suspect testing. Now, suspect testing is basically the main way that the OU tier bans things. And as you can read off of this, you have to achieve a coil rating of 2700 or higher on a suspect test ladder that the Pokemon that is being suspected is banned in. And if you achieve that rating, you post on the thread, I got my Rex, and once you do that, you get a vote, and you can vote ban, no ban, or abstain, which means that you're choosing not to vote, even though you have Rex. So basically, once the suspect happens, the vote has to be at least 60% vote in favor of a ban for the Pokemon to be banned. And if it does not reach that number, then the Pokemon remains in OU. As happened with Deoxys Speed very early in the meta, it stayed in OU because it did not receive a high enough vote on the suspect. So, you may be asking, who comes and decides what Pokemon are suspected? And that's a really good question. And it's these people, the Overused Tiering Council. These 5 people, Alderone, Haunter, Nachos, McMegan, and M. Dragon, come together and they explain quick bans and suspect tests on this thread. I'm going to post all of these threads in the description so you can just click right to them. And basically, these 5 people come together and they decide what Pokemon is going to be suspected. Okay, so how do they decide that? Basically, as you can read here, the council identifies a potentially unhealthy aspect of the metagame and posts a discussion thread about it in uncharted territory. The purpose for this is to see what the player base at large thinks. If there's enough demand for a suspect test, the council announces a suspect test, which is what we just looked at, was the suspect test thread. So basically, these 5 people come together and they decide what Pokemon is going to be suspected. And it may seem kind of completely random. What Pokemon gets suspected? How do you decide out of 700 and some, which Mons get suspected? Well, that's actually probably one of the easiest questions to answer about this process. I'm gonna keep the current color scheme. Sorry about that. But what Mon gets suspected? Well, this is where it gets kind of more subjective as opposed to objective, and it's based off the viability ranking thread. So this thread is, stickied at the top of the OU forums, and basically it ranks all of the Pokemon that can be used in OU without being absolutely terrible. Like, they don't rank Magikarp, because it's not even close to viable in OU, so they really don't have a reason to put a viability ranking on it. So as you can see, they have ranks all the way down to D rank, and these are listed in alphabetical order for each rank. So each Mon in each rank is theoretically equal to every other Mon in its rank. This order doesn't mean anything. And the Pokemon that get suspected always come from this list, the S rank list. So if there was to be a suspect in OU right now, which there isn't going to be for another 2 weeks, but that's beside the point, it would be one of these 5 Pokemon. These are the only 5 Pokemon that can be suspected right now. Now, what defines an S rank Pokemon? If we look at this list, it says that an S rank is reserved for Pokemon that are amazing in the OU metagame. These Pokemon are usually able to perform a variety of roles effectively, or can just do one extremely well. Their use has low risk involved and high reward exerted. Pokemon in this rank have very few flaws that are patched up by numerous positive traits. So, these S rank Pokemon are basically the best of the best in the metagame, and those are the ones that can choose. Those are the ones that can possibly be banned. And how does a Pokemon become S rank? So at the beginning of the generation, basically, I believe it was the OU Council, or at least a group of players, came together and gave a rough outline of what the ranks of the Pokemon should be, or what they at least expected them to be. And as time goes on, people in this thread can post things like this. Let me see if I can find a good example. Here, Charizard X to A+. It's still a good Mon, but not S rank. It checks and counters things, blah blah blah. So basically, people in this thread get to argue where Pokemon should go. There should be a change in their ranking. Like, I think that Mega Absol should drop, or it should rank up, stuff like that. And basically, if people make good enough arguments and enough people agree after discussion in the thread and discussion with the council, then things can move up or down in rank. And basically that's how this viability thread is, how it comes about, is that people, in general, just kind of come together and build this list based off of, facts and, just kind of the general population, what they think of them on, and how it performs in the tier. And, so yeah, one of these 5 Mons is chosen, based off of what the OU Council thinks should be the next suspect, and then that gets suspected. And then if it gets a 60% vote, it gets banned. So I think that's basically a general overview of how the banning system works in Smogon. And I think it's kind of, not a lot of people actually know how that works, and they just kind of assume that, Smogon just bans stuff because, they want to. Well, I mean, yeah. So that's kind of an opinion. And I'd kind of like to go back now and give my opinions on this process. So, back to Smogon, and starting with how the tiers are built, meaning how usage statistics define what the tiers are. I honestly think that that's a pretty ingenious way to decide how to get tiers built, because the players basically define what are good Pokemon and what are not, and the fact that Mons are used more means that they're better, basically. And so yeah, I have no issue with how the tiers are built. and I think that it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, so I agree completely with the fact that the tiers should be defined by usage, and then any changes in those tiers should be defined by a ban. So next, let's get into suspect. So I really disagree with the suspect testing method of banning things. Basically, statisticians will tell you that if you put out a survey that is completely voluntary, that the majority of the time you're going to get a negative response, because people who have a negative feeling will generally do more to have their feeling be heard than people who have a positive feeling. So when you isolate one Pokemon and say that, should this Pokemon be banned, I would say that most of the time you're going to get a yes on this Pokemon should be banned, regardless of whether or not the Pokemon should be banned, because the people who want it gone are gonna work harder to get Rex, and they're gonna make sure that their voice is heard. Whereas so it's just that kind of goes against that, and this Pokemon it just kind of gets put on trial, and I'd say that it's much easier to in Pokemon, it's much easier to explain why something is broken than it is not broken. Because, for instance, in terms of Aegislash, I didn't think it was broken. I thought that it was a very, very good Pokemon. And I think it's difficult to explain that, it's a really good Pokemon, and you just, you have to predict around it, but that's not impossible, and you have to account for it in team building. And, that's kind of that argument. It's, not like, it's not a, oh, I didn't have any problems with it. It's a, it's a really good Mon, but it doesn't overwhelm the tier. And I think it's much easier to express that a Pokemon is broken because you can utilize all of the sets that it runs and be like, man, this set destroys these counters, this set destroys these counters. That's part of playing the game, is determining what set your opponent is using based off of team preview, how they're using it in battle and scouting and stuff like that. And it's easier to explain why something's broken because you can drop stupid calcs like Aegislash makes Slowbro, which would be really good, otherwise unviable because it OHKOs it with Shadow Ball. Well, so, and one of my other issues with suspect testing is on this suspect thread, there's no explanation of what you're voting for. You're basically voting for should Aegislash be banned or not. I think that the suspect test would be a much better process if there was a reason. Say in this case, we're suspect testing Aegislash because it is over-centralizing in the OU metagame. And basically you're voting, is it over-centralizing or is it not? Something like that. I know that there is a thread somewhere on Smogon that defines where or what makes a Pokemon bannable. Like, it's over-centralizing, or it beats a majority of the meta, and it has a list of things that make it bannable. And I just looked for 20-25 minutes, asked another couple people, they couldn't find it, asked leaders of the OU room on Poke Showdown where that thread is, and no one knows where it is. So that's kind of disconcerting, because it's nice to know what you're voting to ban. I wish that in these threads it was clearly defined that this, I think in each suspect thread there should be a Pokemon is bannable because, and then the reasons that you can ban a Pokemon. Because there was someone in this thread who is like an OU, is important in the OU metagame, and I think is like a mod or something, and said, we don't only ban Pokemon because they're broken. Well, what are the rules then? What defines making a Pokemon bannable? I know that there's a list somewhere, but if I can't find it in 30 minutes, then how are you going to expect someone else to find it? Maybe it gets defined to people when they are about to vote, but at that point, all of this discussion goes on without there being any wherewithal of this is why a Pokemon is bannable, and it's very frustrating. I think that if you start banning Pokemon because you don't like them being in the tier, that's a very dangerous, slippery slope that you can go down because, you know, for instance with Aegislash, I don't like Aegislash being in OU because it makes Mega Medicham really unviable, and it makes, you know, Mega Heracross not very viable, and I honestly think that's a hunk of baloney. I think that, you know, Pokemon should be banned if, you know, they're broken, and basically this is why we have the tiering system. If you don't like a tier because you can't use Mega Heracross because, you know, Mega Medicham because Aegislash is in the tier, then go play a different tier that you might like better. You know, I really like NU, and it's completely different than OU in a lot of ways. And that's kind of, you know, if OU is something that I see should be a stable tier that you can play and get really good at and, you know, kind of perfect. And if there are broken things, then yeah, they deserve to get banned, you know? But at the same time, you know, you can't just ban something because you don't like it, if that makes sense. And going along with what I said about, you know, once a Pokemon gets put up for suspect, it's kind of on trial, and normally when you're given a trial by choice, most people are going to be negative about it. And the first post in this thread, the suspect thread, is, I think with Aegislash banned, we can finally see a lot more Mega Pokemon in the meta. So, just because something was announced as a suspect, this man assumed that Aegislash is going to be banned. And I think that's kind of part of the problem, is that a suspect test doesn't seem to be an actual discussion. It doesn't seem to be a voting process. It seems to be a, alright, this is the next Pokemon that's going to be banned. It's been a very long time since something has been suspected and hasn't been banned. And I think that's partially because of the process. Like I said, that it's, you know, when you're given an opportunity and it's kind of like, I finally get a chance to vote on something in my tier, you want to change it because, you know, you don't have really any say otherwise. You're only given this one mon, and you have to decide, do I want to keep it or do I want it to stay? And I think most of the time people are going to choose that, you know, it needs to go, because, you know, that's the only choice they have, and they feel like they're making an impact. So the next part of this is the OU Council. I respect all of these people individually, and I understand why they are the OU Council. Now, based off of this thread, it says that, you know, they make a thread in uncharted territory. Then they see what the player base at large thinks. So again, it just kind of goes back to these 5 people are basically deciding what is something that is potentially broken. You know, they're the ones who get to decide what gets put out in front of the people, and so basically they're the ones who are like, oh, is this broken? And like I said, there are going to be a lot of people who come out that are negative, and they're going to say, yeah, it's broken, and then it's going to be suspected, and those same people who didn't like it in the first place are going to be like, yeah, it's still broken, and they're going to follow it through, and it's going to get banned. And this is kind of why I think that the OU Council, it kind of is, it's interesting because they come in and they say that they're doing it, for the people at large. They ask the people at large, and that works to an extent, but to be honest, it's what you're putting out in front of them, and these 5 people out of the thousands and thousands of people that play this game competitively are the ones that get to decide basically what gets suspected, and that's kind of interesting in my opinion. I mean, it probably comes down to being maybe 3 or 4 of these people want it to be suspected, so it comes down to 3 or 4 people in the entire metagame that kind of make the decision of what gets put out in front of the people. And you could argue, yeah, well, it comes off of this list that the players create and formulate. And that's kind of the balancing point of this whole process, is this list. And I think there's kind of a misconception about S-rank Pokemon. I think it's healthy for the metagame to have S-rank Pokemon. I think it's healthy that there are mons that are better than all of the other ones in the tier. Regardless of how many Pokemon you take out of the tier, there's always going to be there's always going to be a section of Pokemon that are just better than the rest, And I'm not trying to go, all Velicify here and be like, oh, well, if you ban one thing, the next one's just going to get banned and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that there's a difference between a Pokemon being broken and just being better than all the other mons in the tier. Like a Azumarill, is it better than Venusaur and Terrakion and all of these? Probably. Is it much, much better? Is it broken? No. It's a really good mon. It's just a really good mon. And the fact that it's in this, if you believe this list, and it says in alphabetical order, then you would say that every mon on this list is equal with every other mon, and every mon on this list is equal with every other mon. So if you're choosing to suspect one of these mons, what makes that mon better than any of the other Pokemon on the S-rank list? If it's given a rank, that rank should be consistent throughout. So say we want to suspect Thundurus, why Thundurus as opposed to these other 4 mons that, according to the list that the OU Council chooses from to make suspects, what makes this mon better than these mons that are on the same level, that are supposedly exactly the same in their place in the meta? And I think that's kind of where the system falls apart, in my opinion, because then the S-rank list shouldn't have more than 1 mon ever. If you're going to pull 1 or 2 mons at least, if you're going to pull from this list, then I can argue that why are the other mons not as good, And it's kind of interesting to me. And I think currently none of these mons should be banned. I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm very anti-ban. I feel like people should adapt to the meta that's around them, unless something is incredibly stupid. Like Mega Lucario was incredibly stupid. Mega Kangaskhan was incredibly stupid. Those mons were way too good, and everyone knew it. And to me, that's a true S-rank Pokemon. This says that, this Pokemon is amazing in the OU metagame. It can perform a variety of roles, or just do one extremely well. Their use has low risk and high reward. Well, that's kind of true. But, I mean, again, going back to, like, Azumarill, saying that it has low risk and high reward is kind of interesting for several of these mons. I mean, using Azumarill means that, it gets walled by a lot of things. It's not a perfect Pokemon. It gets walled by, like, Ferrothorn. It gets walled by Mega Venusaur. It gets walled by it gets walled by, a lot of stuff. And that, if it's banded, then you can figure out it's banded, and you have to predict around it, or scout, with Protect and stuff like that. and if it's assault vest, then you figure that early and you play around it. And if it's belly drum, every team should just have a check. It's a belly drum and zoom roll. It's not really that hard. You just run a check, and you don't let it set up. It's kind of like people are afraid of mons that can set up and potentially sweep, but you have to build your team to prevent that from happening, and you have to play to prevent that from happening, or at least attempt to. And then Charizard X, I think it's kind of underwhelming. It's not incredibly powerful. There are checks for it in the tier, and one of the things is there are low risk, high reward, blah blah blah. Well, part of the thing about this is if I use this, I can't use another Mega, so you're choosing your Mega and all of that, and it can go down the list, and so I kind of disagree with how the banning system works, and it's because I think that there's a lot of power given to these 5 people, and that the way the mon is chosen, and also the fact that the Pokemon kind of gets put on trial, and in general when that happens you're going to get a negative response. I kind of like the way that Smogon used to do it, and back in the day they had a I didn't find a thread for this, so I'm just gonna have to explain it. But back in the day there was, I think they called it like a 15 plus 15 rule or something like that. And it was the top 15 players plus the next, I think it was the next 15 players. So, basically the top 30 of every tier at the end of every month got to vote on, I think they were given an unlimited amount of things to vote on that they wanted banned. And if 75% of those people voted that something should be banned, it was immediately removed from the metagame. And if 50% of the people voted that they wanted it, then it was put on watch. And if it got over 50% 2 consecutive months, then it would be banned. So I feel like that was a better system because there were more opinions involved, and the players themselves could shape the metagame as opposed to not necessarily to what they want, but they could basically immediately check what was wrong. They could also, it made sense because there weren't as many complex bans and stuff, because you could just, you could just choose what needed to be gone, and I feel like the metagame was much healthier that way. And I think that one of the common misconceptions is that just because something is used a lot means it's broken. In Gen 4, I think Richard told me this statistic, Heatran was used on like 80% of teams in OU, but that didn't mean it was broken. It was just really, really good, and it fit into the meta. And they had the 15 plus 15 banning system at that time, and it didn't get banned because it wasn't broken. It was just really good. And I liked that process better because it got more people involved, and the best example I can give is last gen. Landorus I got suspected because there was a big core going around of Landorus, Keldeo, Tyranitar. It was a really good core, or as Richard would call it, KLT. But basically, Landorus got suspected and he got banned to break up KLT. So we banned a combination of Pokemon, and by banning one of them, and the question is, what made Landorus better than Keldeo? I mean, he got Rock Polish, but they were both equally important, and Keldeo worked in rain better than Landorus did. Landorus was just, really good on sand and stuff like that, and it makes me wonder if we had the other system, would both of them have gotten banned at once? Would neither of them gotten banned? And I think if you had suspected Keldeo instead of Landorus, it also would have gotten banned. But it eventually never got banned because Landorus was gone. So I feel like that's kind of, with suspect testing you get to choose the direction you want to push the meta. Whereas if you let the tier shift every month like it does in all the other tiers because of usage, then you get a more harmonious meta. You get a meta that is being formed constantly, and that if there's a problem with that, then maybe both of them would have gotten banned that month, because both of them played just as an important part, and they were both really, really good. And I think that it just gives more power to the players, and it gives more people's voice gets a chance to be heard. And yeah, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about this. I don't know if I explained this very well. I'm just kind of trying to explain my thoughts on something that's kind of complex, and yeah, it's just, I feel like the system could be better, because too long didn't read takeaway message. I think the suspect system could be better, because pretty much every mon that gets suspected is going to get banned. Talking to a lot of top players, not a lot of top players thought the Aegis Slash was broken, but it got banned barely, 62% to the 60 that was needed, because there's a lot of bandwagoning on the negative side. OU Council, I think they have too much power. They kind of get to push the metagame in the direction they want it to go, as opposed to the way that the players want it to go. And that's that's just kind of my opinion on that. And also, this list, it seems so arbitrary. I know that you rank them, and I think this is good for helping people get into the metagame and learning what are good mons and what are not good mons, but if you're going to have these 5 that are all S rank, and they're all supposedly equal, then why do you only suspect one of them? Why are you not suspecting all 5 of those mons at once? And, yeah, I mean, it's just, I feel like it's kind of, it's just interesting, and, basically, I'd like you guys to leave your thoughts about the Smogon banning system in general in the comments, and just feel free to ask any questions that hopefully I can answer. And yeah, thanks for watching. And the UU does it completely differently. This is just the final side note. UU just has a council that just votes, and Coco Loco is basically Hitler, and he bans anything that's relatively good. So that's why OU is better than UU. And peace out, guys.